Welcome to the CA Unified Infrastructure Management Configure Load Balancing for Unified Management Portal video. In this video, I will show you how to configure load balancing in a dual UMP environment. I will discuss the general concepts you need to successfully configure load balancing and provide a specific example using a Citrix NetScaler load balancer. In this scenario, I have a dual UMP configuration. I want to distribute requests between the two systems to increase the availability of the UMP service. I will resolve this issue by configuring my Citrix NetScaler load balancer software to distribute requests across multiple UMP systems. There are many types of load balancing software available, so the specific details for configuring the various types of software will vary. But there are some general concepts you should always follow to configure load balancing in a dual UMP configuration. When you configure load balancing, you need to add the UMP servers to a pool. Create a virtual IP address to access the pool of UMP servers. Create an HTTP or HTTPS service group. This ties the virtual IP address and the pool together. The communication protocol you will use will be dependent on your particular environment. Configure cookie persistence for reliable connections to UMP. I first log into Citrix NetScaler and go to the configuration page. I expand the traffic management tree. This is where the load balancing configuration options are located. Expand load balancing and select servers. Notice that neither of the UMP systems exist in the configuration. I must add this information to the configuration. So I select Add to enter the information for my first server. For this example, I enter the name UMP1 for my first server. You can enter any name that is meaningful for your organization. I must also enter the server IP address. No additional information is needed for my environment. I click Create to add this information to my list of servers. The server appears in the list. I now need to add the information for my second UMP server. Here, I have already added a name and IP address for my second UMP server. So I add this information to my list of servers. I have now added both of the servers that exist in my dual UMP environment. Notice that both of the servers are in the enabled state. An enabled state indicates that my IP address is valid. I must now add a service group. I select service groups in the tree to see the service groups page. The service group will allow me to identify the service that will be managed by the load balancer. In my environment, I need to use the HTTP service. But remember, depending on your environment, you might need to use the HTTPS service. I click Add to configure a load balancing service group. I enter a service group name of UMP_HTTP. Notice that the default setting for protocol is already set to HTTP. I do not need to make any additional changes to this page. So I click OK to add this information to my configuration. Notice that the effective state of my server is down. The effective state of the service group I just created will not turn green until it is associated with a virtual server. I'll show you how to associate this service group with a virtual server later in this video. I can add the service group members by modifying this service group. Click Members to view the service group's members list. Notice that the list contains no service group members. Click the list to add the UMP servers created previously as members. I select Server-Based because I have already entered the server information for my two UMP servers. This changes the available configuration options. I can now add my UMP servers. Here is the list of servers that I can select. The list shows the names and IP addresses of the UMP servers that I previously defined on the Servers page. I want to add both of these servers. So I click OK to add them as my service group members. Remember that I previously defined my communication protocol as HTTP. I am using the default port of 80 for HTTP. You might use a different port number in your environment. I must enter the port information here. My service group member information is now complete. So I add this information to my service group. Notice that the state is enabled and the effective state is now up. I go to the virtual servers to configure a virtual IP address. This is the IP address that the users will contact the UMP service on. I click Add to enter the information. I enter a meaningful name for my virtual server. I choose to use UMP_VIP as the name. and then I enter a VIP address that is on the same subnet as the management interface for my load balancing device. Now I'll click OK to add this information to my configuration. Right now, my virtual server shows a state of down because I have not bound a service group to the virtual IP address. I select my virtual server and click Edit so I can update the configuration. Notice that no service group is listed. Click the list to add a service group. I want to view a list of the configured service groups. Here is the service group I previously configured. I select it and add it to my service group binding. I can now bind this service group to my virtual server. The settings are not saved until I click the Done button. This is why the virtual server still shows a state of down. There is one more additional step I must complete. I must configure cookie persistence. I select persistence. There are currently no settings for cookie persistence, so I select Cookie Insert. I also enter a timeout value. I enter 0 because I want the cookie to persist indefinitely. This will ensure that I have reliable connections to UMP. I scroll down to the bottom of the page and add my changes. I click Done to update my configuration. Notice that my virtual server now shows up for both the state and the effective state. Now I save my changes and select Yes to confirm. I now want to verify that my load balancing configuration is working. To do this, I click the Dashboard tab. I select Service Groups. Now I'll click the service group I created and move the slider to the right. Notice that each server has an active connection. This shows that my load balancer configuration is working. For additional information about CA Unified Infrastructure Management, refer to the documentation on the CA DocOps platform, or visit the CA UIM community to join in the discussion. The links can be found in the YouTube description located below this video.